finds to be alone, with the sun and the wind and the sky. Not that she was actually alone. The road was lined with Subarus and Jeeps and SUVs of all kinds, transportation for those who'd come to the canyon to climb the cliffs for which it was famous. People drove in by the hundreds to crawl up the rocks like four-legged spiders, ropes trailing like webs behind them. But the climbers didn't bother her. Growing up in a two-room hogan with 7 brothers and 3 sisters, her Aunt Louise, her mother, and her grandparents, she'd long ago learned to turn inward when she needed privacy. Besides, she hadn't come here to get away from people. She'd come to get away from the concrete and neon of the city, to breathe clean air, to feel earth beneath her feet. It had been 3 years since she'd left the reservation, perhaps the best and toughest decision of her life. It wasn't that she didn't like living among other Navajo, or Diné. In fact, there'd been a time in her life when she'd vowed never to do what so many young Diné people did: grow up, go to college, and then leave for high-paying jobs far away from the parents and elders who had raised them. She hadn't been able to keep that vow, but not for lack of trying. She'd gotten her journalism degree at the University of New Mexico, then come back to the res to work at the Navajo Times, hoping to use her skills to help give a voice to the voiceless among her people. At first, she'd felt she'd found her place in the world. In her first year as a reporter, she'd broken a story about families growing sick after being relocated from traditional home sites to government housing that had been built on the radioactive mine tailings. She'd won awards for her work, but the greatest reward had been the satisfaction she'd felt at helping Diné families. She lived in a trailer in Tequahotzani, known to the outside world as Window Rock during the work week, making the long drive home to Ka'aibiito each Friday night. Her truck filled with food and water she'd bought with her paycheck. Her grandmother would wait up for her, welcoming her home with warm fry bread, a hot bowl of mutton stew, and a strong cup of coffee, asking her to sit and share the news from the Earth Center, the ceremonial name for the Navajo Nation's capital. But her mother had made it clear that she'd have been happier had Kat stayed away. That's how it had always been: love from her grandmother, loathing from her mother. Though Kat had hoped her mother would at least come to respect her for the work she did at the newspaper, nothing had changed. No matter what Kat might become, no matter what she might accomplish, she had done her mother unforgivable harm. She'd been conceived of a man who wasn't her mother's husband. A Bilagana man. A white man. The only thing Kat knew about her father was the color of his skin, and the fact that he'd gotten her mother pregnant, then left her to deal with the consequences alone. He hadn't even stayed on the res long enough to put his name on Kat's birth certificate. "Every time I look at you, I see him," her mother had told her more times than Kat cared to remember. "Your green eyes, your light hair, your white skin. Why did you have to be born?" Kat's eyes were hazel, not green. Her hair was dark brown, and her skin was more caramel than peaches and cream. But there was no denying that she was fathered by a different man than her brothers and sisters, a fact that they refused to forget, calling her a Navajo instead of Navajo, and teasing her about her eyes. And so, faced with her mother's resentment and the indifference of her siblings, she'd piled. It was the only time in her life she could remember seeing tears in her grandmother's eyes. "Don't forget your Diné tongue," her grandmother had said, before turning back to her weaving, too upset to watch Kat drive away. Kat had driven north to Denver, winning a coveted seat on the Denver Independent's investigative team, the I-Team, as its environmental reporter. Although she missed her grandmother and the wide-open beauty of the desert with all of her soul, she loved her job and had grown to care for her fellow I-Team members. And if the city sometimes seemed to press in on her, making her feel shut off and alone, well, that's why there were mountains. She came to the trailhead and left the dirt road behind, ducking beneath pine boughs and following the steep trail uphill. From somewhere overhead came the cry of a prairie falcon, followed by the chatter of a nervous squirrel. Falcons nested in these cliffs, as did golden eagles.